This is an LA CTO Forum production.
Welcome to Exception Handlers, the podcast where CTOs debug the challenges that keep us up at night. I'm Alex.
And I'm Bill.
And on today's episode, we are very excited to interview Amit Masoun, a longtime LA CTO Forum member and a longtime CTO, about how non-engineers can leverage AI to build apps and start businesses and all that, and how engineers can help. Amit, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alex. Good to be here. I appreciate it. Hey, Bill, how are you?
Doing great, thanks. Looking forward to this.
Same
here.
Before we get into it, do you want to give us kind of a brief just overview of what you've been up to and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I been in engineering leadership for better part of a decade and a half. I really am hands-on. I've worked at small stage startups mostly as a founding engineer, CTO, building products, processes, teams. Really sort of enjoyed that space. I'm currently working in health tech AI and precision medicine at a publicly traded company. We are all in on AI, whether it's process operations or in product. And I'm happy to talk through a lot of that stuff as well today. That's sort of my hobby lately has been building stuff. It's builder's age, and happy to talk about that stuff too, both personally and professionally, technical and non-technical. And so that's me in a nutshell for the tech world today.
Perfect guy to talk to about what we want to talk about today. So let's get into it. I guess we want to first start by talking a little bit about what people think they can do with AI. And by people, I specifically mean people who are not engineers, CTOs, and so forth. Just regular people who think they can do stuff with AI because it's ubiquitous and it's super powerful. So from your perspective, what does that look like? What can people think they can do?
Sure. If you watch enough TikTok, you can think you can build a $10 billion SaaS company in a weekend. So
it takes 3 days. We all know this.
That's possible. Honestly, having doing a lot of building and building a lot of stuff as a technical person, there is a lot you can do. There's tons of stuff. You can basically build anything. Like that's not an exaggeration. Well, whether that anything is production ready is a different story. But if you have an imagination and you can tell a story and you can write words down of an idea you want to build, it's very, very, very capable platforms to build this on now. Claude Code, Claude Cowork, Codex. You can even use Gemini and ChatGPT if you're able to just cut and paste code. But you can build anything you really want to build. It's remarkable time to be alive as a builder. So I say that as like what is possible. It's anything. What is your second question? What is actually possible? It is all actually possible, but it takes a lot of iteration to get there. It takes a lot of refinement to get there. It takes a lot of time to get there. You can't like Bill said, it's 3 days to build that $10 billion SaaS company, not 1 day. But realistically, even that takes time to build because you're not going to have the best practices of deployment or an engineer's eye of looking at what's scalable, what's not scalable, how many people can use it, database connections, all this stuff. While those are being built into products, they're great. It's probably a good idea to get a technical eye on some of that stuff, at least in the next year or so, until these tools get really, really, really good and we're obsolete.
So I definitely want to get to how us CTO folk can help. But actually, before we get into that, just let's dig deeper on what currently is the art of the possible. And if you have an example of what you've personally done, I would love to hear that because I think that'd be very illustrative for the thing we're discussing.
Sure. So personally, like I said, I'm in AI tools all day, whether it's process or product. So building in Claude Code, Cursor, Codex, Open Code. I use all the harnesses that I possibly can. I'm building all day, and then also like code-based ones at LangChain or Crew AI. So I can build AI agents, not a problem. The tools that are out there. Sorry, can you repeat that question?
What I would love to hear about is, again, given that we're really trying to figure out like what can a non-engineer pull off, right? What is it? What is an example of something somebody did that's like, look at this.
Okay, I got a ton, and it's actually interesting you mentioned that because Really recently I've had sort of a high on watching people get their aha moment in AI, and this is non-technical folks. I've devoted my time to helping family and friends just learn some of these tools so that they can become more productive and understand the landscape moving forward of what jobs are really going to be like, and how AI is going to impact that. So I'll give you a prime example. I've got a friend of mine who's a recruiter, zero technical aptitude. A few weeks ago, I spoke to him and I said, "Hey, have you used these tools before?" He said, "Nope." I said, "What's the biggest problem you're trying to solve?" That's the question I was asked. What's a day-to-day problem you're trying to solve as a business owner specifically? And he was, I can't source candidates and do all the stuff and do my business development and go get new clients. So great, let's build you a sourcing tool. So I had him download Claude Cowork, signed up. I had him talk through. I actually had him also download WhisperFlow. We can get into the input methods later too, which I think it really
literally
accelerates
have him talk through it.
stuff.
That's a good idea.
Literally talk through it. I find it better when when I talk through stuff. So he downloaded it. He had it. He prompted it and asked it, "Hey, I need you to build me a skill that does X, Y, Z." In his case, I want you to find me candidates for a job I post in. And after some iteration, we got to a point that said, "Give me the link you want to find candidates for," and it did. It gave him an Excel spreadsheet within like 30 seconds. He was blown away. They all came from LinkedIn. Then he kind of got the hang of it, and he's like, "Well, I don't want them from LinkedIn. I want them from GitHub, and I want you to score their code, or if there's anything publicly available, I want you to see what they've done in technology wise." So now he's got a new list, and 30 seconds later, and so it's just great to watch his mind like go, "Oh wow, okay, this is possible. This is possible." So I left it at that with him for an hour. A few days later, he called. He's like, I built a CRM system for myself using Claude Code. I've rebuilt my website. I'm tying it into my CRM system, so my jobs are available online. I'm moving my website from Squarespace to a hosted site, and this guy didn't have any technical ability going into it. So that's just one example. I've got more, but I saw Bill. I don't know if you have a question.
Yeah, I was just following along with this, which is awesome. I'm having similar conversations with people who have only fear at the moment about AI, but are dying to learn about it because it seems like everyone else is taking advantage of it. But I haven't had this happen yet, and I'm wondering if you have. At what point do they realize that it's not a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow? And
They do realize quickly, but it's not that initial glance. Like,
oh no, the initial's like, this
yeah,
is amazing.
yeah.
I can do it. I can do anything.
It takes a few days of let's say you put together a schedule on a skill you built, and it doesn't perform the same way every time, or it doesn't put the file in the same folder, or it runs into permission issues that it didn't run into. So it does get frustrating, and then the output is not what you want, and so it really can get frustrating. But the whole process is don't fix the my methodology has been don't fix the problem, fix the code fix the prompt that fixes the problem. So I always have them go back to say, hey, update the skill or prompt to do this. Don't go and fix it manually. Don't go do the stuff that you shouldn't be doing, because these tools are capable as long as you prompt them better.
So I actually wanted to just double click into the two examples you gave. I think are really interesting because in my mind, there is a material difference between saying, hey, Cowork, find me a list of candidates by trolling through LinkedIn or what have you, versus build me a CRM system, right? There's like an inherently different level of investment, specificity, and so forth. And I guess maybe that's one of the kind of key things I would love to sort out here. How much is too much, right? Like, so CRM system is a lot more than just a screen and a database if you're doing it right. But a thing that looks through LinkedIn for candidates probably is all it needs to be. How do you think about that? How do you give them guidance in that sense?
Unless they're building it to like productionalize and sell to friends and family or create a business like they tell you on TikTok, I think people should be building their own stuff. They should be building the tools that.
Let me make a little bit of a sort of just slide for additional framing, so that
Sure.
hopefully, the reason I think it's a whole other can of worms is because like once you say I'm hosting my own thing,
Yep.
implying it's in the cloud somewhere, and suddenly you've got uptime requirements, potential security considerations, and
Right.
all kinds of other stuff that a regular mortal probably isn't aware of, much less knows how to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is what separates, at least in the examples you gave, one from the other. So how do you Do you know what I mean? Like they don't even
Yeah,
know what
yeah.
they even know, right? Yeah.
They don't know what they don't know, and the tools do make it easy to do what you shouldn't be doing.
Right.
I'll go back to what I was saying. The distinction is if you're building it for personal use to make your administrative life easier for yourself, and you're not putting in personal information and stuff into it. Maybe it's just a tool, again, CRM tool just for yourself. Maybe it's okay. I get that there's security implications, and you probably want to like prompt it to build it in the right way, but most people are not going to. They're just going to do a one sentence thing to build me a CRM, and that's going to be problematic. And that is a space I'm looking at. Like, how do you get builders to build safely, securely, and compliantly, and be able to deploy that, in a secure way? That's definitely a gap in what folks are trying to do. So if you're building for yourself, I generally think it's okay if you're not, if you're not going crazy and putting a ton of like API keys and stuff out there. But you have to have that knowledge. Like if you don't have it up front, it's likely going to leak, like the whole code base of Claude Code.
I mean, even if you do have the knowledge up front, that's no guarantee of anything.
So yeah, it's a guarantee.
No, I'll go down that rabbit hole really quickly. Let's don't go there. Just as an aside, and I'll follow up on this. One of the things that I've tried to really call out when I'm talking to people that are just starting to get here is do not try to create a prompt that solves the problem at once. Let's treat it like Legos. For instance, if you're thinking of a process, start with where you want to start and where you want to end, and then go back and say, let's insert this here, let's insert that there, let's do these changes. And in my experience, and I think for people who don't have the abilities to craft a very good contextual framework, this helps them keep things into bite-sized pieces that the model has a better chance of being predictable on and taking them to where they want to go.
Yeah, it's a good call out. Things like Claude Code, Claude Cowork, if you're talking about non-technical use, they have great tools built in, like the question answer tool. So you can actually prompt it to say, ask me the questions I need to build a skill, and it'll go through and ask you the questions. It'd be a good idea if they just defaulted a security question in there too.
And what I call the diary process, right? Yeah. It does a good job of keeping notes, and then it lobotomizes itself every time it does a compact or you switch context. And so I manually hey, just capture what we've learned in case we want to come back here. And it works. It's very simple and kind of dumb, but it works very well because it's good at telling itself what to remember the next time you come back.
Yeah, and it's another interesting point there. I've worked with engineers even on a day-to-day that still try to one-shot stuff. So they'll say, they'll put in a Figma link and say, hey, build me this front-end feature. And that's the prompt. And while that would be great to do, that's not how you do it currently. You have to take baby steps and kind of go slow. Yes. And I think that's where sort of these folks that coming from a fresh perspective that are building have an advantage.
Yes,
because they're able to build good products because they're going slow and they don't understand it. So they'll go step by step. They might ask like a pie in the sky ask up front, but then it will ask questions back, and then they'll get honed in on like these particular parts of the thing. That's where I've seen non-technical folks excel in building products because they're able to break things down much more easier than engineers are. Because we look at stuff like, oh yeah, just put this in. This technology should work. That's what I've seen from engineers, at least that I work with. So it's been interesting. There's different points of view of how to handle this. There's still skepticism on some folks' side, which I get. People are bought in, or overextended and bought in too much, where they don't look at code at all, and bugs get out, and like there's a cycle to fix. So there's a whole spectrum of things here where there's no best practices defined yet, and hopefully we can, as technologists, we can all do that together and help our networks.
Yes. So I just want to kind of come back to the through line of this conversation. So if you think about, let's just kind of separate things that you're doing for your own convenience, skills, automation of life, what have you, in one bucket. And I don't think there's anybody seriously arguing that that's not a good use of things like cowork, right? It's wonderful in what it can do. And then the other bucket is I'm building an app. Like I'm actually sitting there with no context or knowledge, and I'm trying to build an app. To focus just on that, because I think that's really where the interesting bits happen. So if like a family member showed up with an AI built app, how are you, like when you're looking at that thing, when do you say, yeah, this has legs, or this was just a toy thing that's not going anywhere? Like, how do you have that conversation? What's your mental model for looking at stuff like this?
Yeah, I would, if a non-technical person said, "Here, log into this thing," I'm going to be skeptical of putting in
Just
credentials.
login alone
Uh,
is enough to raise a
that's
red flag. Yeah.
right there. That scares me. But if they're coming as a from the angle of a prototype or a demo that they can go raise money against and say, "Hey, I've got this great idea," I'm happy to like listen to the idea. Yeah, that's the other. Yeah. So to answer the question, I would be skeptical of folks bringing me stuff and say I'd like to make a business out of this in terms of like actually using a product until I get a chance to technically vet it and look at code, perhaps. So that's my risk tolerance on that. But some people are less risk tolerant, and they will put all of their stuff into some brand new app, and it'll, they're happy to do that. So it depends on your risk tolerance, but if you're going to do that and you actually want to make a business or a product out of something you're building as a non-technical person, I would say partner with somebody, reach out to your networks, find somebody who's technical that can sit with you for an hour. Maybe you can explain to them what you're trying to do. Maybe they can look at your code. Maybe you can look at the product together and see where the gaps might be. And you can write those gaps down and then go back to the AI agent and say, "Hey, I'd love to fill these gaps in." Like you can use the agent to help you fill in the gaps you're missing. But I think at least for the next 6 to 12 to 18 months, kind of like if you're building something and you're not technical, have a technical friend look at it. Or hire somebody that can take a quick look before you gain traction and start getting stuff out, because you want to make sure it's built right from the get-go, at least as much as possible.
Somewhat related to this, how are you thinking about platforms that are designed for this kind of thing, Replit, Lovable, what have you, versus just using Claude Cowork to bang something out and have it push it to AWS? Do you have any particular thoughts or direction you'd give somebody if they're like, "Hey, where should I be building this thing?"
Yeah, I think using a platform is a good idea, just because they've got some opinionated approach to deployment of that code. Some are better than others. I know. I think they're all sort of converging to the same mean: is you build the code there, you can deploy code through there. They'll do security checks. You can build front end, you can build back end. Lovable being one of those, Base 44 being one of those. Like you can build pretty capable apps on these things. And I know friends and family friends that have built apps on those they have users. People are using those apps. So again, the risk tolerance of those folks might be a little lower, but I think those are good starting points. Claude Code is can be daunting. It's a CLI based tool to out of the box, and that might be a little scary. IDE is less scary, and you can see more stuff, but still doesn't guide you or help you. Doesn't give you sort of guardrails, and I think some of these tools do. I haven't used them extensively. I'll be upfront. Like I've toyed around with Lovable. I've toyed around with Base 44. I think it's called. A few of the other ones, Bolt, but I think they're good starting points for sure.
Yeah, and it's also you hear these horror stories about I had a production app on Replit and then it just dropped the database. You're like, well, they're platforms, but they're not bulletproof. There's still ways to.
We're still in the Wild West. Like I think people are ready to build. They want to build. People there's a lot of imaginative and creative folks out there that can build stuff. I think the tool set is not the tools are not there, at least out of the box, like to hit one button and say I want to deploy this safely and securely. And so you're going to see problems like this, but they'll lessen over time. But yeah, it's still going to be an issue, the security and the possible database deletion, which as a human, I've done that by mistake. So if the machine does it, it's a human thing.
Well, and I think to a certain extent, the way AI is set up, and I think the tools echo this to a certain extent, is that it's very reinforcing, and it has a level of confidence that is not necessarily justifiable when it comes to production code out there. And I don't think it's just the novice user. I've seen quotes by very, very senior, very smart developers who have just embraced AI to the point where when asked, but sometimes AI writes bad code and the response is, it doesn't matter if it still works. And I'm kind of shocked by that. But then again, they may have a budget that I can't imagine. And I don't know. I think we're going to see more and more of things of what Anthropic went through this week with their accidental release of source code into NPM.
Yeah. it's an interesting point. Like I think we've made AI magical so that folks can put in a sentence that they're hoping it'll build them something great. And in best practice and in daily use, the best way to use AI, at least in its current form, is small chunks. So maybe you can use one sentence to help you plan or do a planning document. But when you're actually building it and comes to implementation, then you want to really do slow and deliberate and check the things it's doing. As a non-technical person, I'm not sure what the right answer is when to build it slowly because you're not necessarily able to get in the code. But at least as an engineer, I build things slowly. If there's more than like three to five files changed, I kind of revert that branch and I start again because that's the extent of a human review that I can do. Because even in real life, that's what I would say. 200 lines of code is about right for to do a code review. You can actually understand what's happening and the changes that are being made.
And I'm sorry, I'm going to rabbit hole just a little bit, but
Yeah.
to that exact point, I talk to people that say they do this in parallel, Alex, and I don't know how that happens. I can serial, like I can have one and then leave it and go to the other one and go back. I can ping pong, but I do not know how you can do it in parallel because I just cannot do a reasonable review at that pace.
Yeah, I mean, by just to be clear, since accusations are being leveled, I have never claimed to be able to concurrently do it literally in parallel. And the way I kind of see it, and actually, I had this long discussion with somebody about this, and not to go on a tangent, but like in reality, the way I kind of see this is most engineers, at least, can have one big thing going on and like a few small things going on at the same time. So the big thing takes the majority of the mental model. And the little stuff kind of on the side, you just kind of pops in and out as it goes. I don't see, and I don't think it's viable for people to be doing two or three big things at the same time. Not literally concurrently, but like just ping ponging. I've tried it. It is possible, but it's very intense. Like you burn out after a very short.
It's exhausting.
It's
What kind of things you're doing in parallel? It's a good question
Like
because
literally
we get this too.
like I've actually tried developing two concurrent features on the same app, like touching different parts on different branches or what have you. And like the way I kind of do it is I just bounce in small increments between the two. So every time I have to look at one, I don't have to spend a ton of time understanding what this one snippet was that it just changed. And I can kind of bounce. But it is because you're constantly intensely looking at stuff.
Yeah.
You can sustain it for more than maybe an hour or two.
Yeah, it's you can use Git work trees in a lot of these harnesses,
I do that.
but just because you can doesn't mean you should. It does make it hard. But where I do find like a logical breakdown is I'm able to put front end repository and back end repository together in a folder, and then I'm able to spin up two different Cloud Code instances and say you're working on front end, you're working on back end, or put in a ticket for each one of those. And then I've seen much better success because now they're working in separate repositories, but together solving the problem from both ends. And that's been good because the code review is much easier there. They're not trying to merge work trees together. It's you got a branch, and I can read them both.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've done a migration from one tech stack to another, and it just like two agents. You do front end, you do back end, then you guys go and then come back to me when you're done. That's doable.
Yeah, I think those boundary conditions are important as you're building this stuff.
Oh
too.
yeah.
You can't have it do everything.
Yes, absolutely, 100%.
You can't just say build me a front end, build me a back end, build me a database. You have to say very specifically, like I need the front end. I need it to be in React. I need it to be do X, Y, Z. Here's the back end. It's got to be in like Python, Fast API, Postgres database, and then those are the ways you want to build. It's like how you build an app code today. Is you want to logically write that out.
This actually brings up an interesting question. Going back to the through line of this discussion, non-engineers trying to do this. So choice of stack, right? Like if you don't know anything about anything and you just sit down with Claude or whatever and say, build me a web app, I think it has defaults. I don't know actually what they are, but it has defaults, I'm sure. It'll naturally be, obviously, front end sort of the obvious. I know some sort of React TypeScript thing, sure. But like the rest of it, I guess, what do you think about that where you're not even aware of what backend is running, what databases are involved, or what like other, queuing systems might be involved? What do you think about that when it comes to non-engineer just build me something?
As an engineer, I care. Because I have opinions. But at the end of the day, going back to what Bill said, I guess for somebody using it that's not tech, if it works, it works, and they don't care what the tech stack is. And as engineers, there's technologies that we take for granted that have been there. We don't know how they work underneath the hood. Like, I mean, maybe you do. I don't know. Like assembly. I good luck. I don't know, but it's part of the stuff we build on top of. So we learn the latest tools that are allowing us to build stuff. AI is just the next tool that's allowing people to build stuff, and you become less dependent on the stack you choose. And I think out of the box, like, we're just using whatever's the most popular on GitHub, wherever it's been trained on. So like React TypeScript is the go-to for front end, unless you very specifically say I want Svelte or Vue or Angular. It's going to build you a React app. That's it.
Along those lines, I just heard a conversation. I don't remember what it was, but there was some sort of study that was done that was measuring for front end work in particular which tool sets were being used in the examples or for writing the code. And apparently, the shift from Sonnet to Opus introduced a major shift in the libraries that it was suggesting that you use to build stuff. And it could be that it's just a changing in the paradigm of what they're being trained on. Everything is a distillation of what it's been fed. But it's going to be interesting to see how that goes too, because at a certain level, if you get something that is overly complex, but it happened to have an example for it up front, you could really make your life a little bit more difficult going down the path of trying to maintain it and extend it or port it.
And so maybe this is where we can transition to kind of the last bit of this, which is, so we've established, give or take, as a non-engineer, you could probably put some together, an app that's functional, may not be a production-ready thing, probably shouldn't be a production-ready thing, but it's something that you may be able to get like traction against with a prototype or whatever. And you mentioned somehow a tech person has to enter from stage left. Okay, great. What does that look like? What role do we play? Should we play in this new world of non-engineers building stuff?
There's a few places I see. So the bookends of building something is the planning phase and then the code review phase. I think are the two key places where humans should still very much be involved, because I compare this to like FSD. If you have FSD in your car and it's driving and it crashes, you're still responsible. So as an engineer, you're still responsible for whatever goes out after you review it. So I think those are important. Where I'm seeing more human interaction, and is, at least in the space I'm in, is our design teams are now using more and more of these tools to build components right into the code. So folks can build React components based on our component libraries, our design styles, and they just do it, and they push a branch, which now goes to a front end engineer that doesn't have to build the component anymore, but now has to integrate it and make sure it's secure, make sure it's error handling and all that stuff. So now that becomes a very specific scope of a human getting involved again. Sure, that could go to an AI, but I think those are the three key places I see where humans are still involved and still should be until we're 100% confident that an end-to-end run of an AI is producing what we need.
So I'm hearing there that engineering, even though product is becoming more involved in the actual code generation, engineering still acting as the throttle, or not a throttle, I would say a checkpoint.
They're a checkpoint. They're that expert that's coming in to make sure, like, the security, compliance, integration, error handling, those types of things that might not be a focal point for people building something for demo or for sales. That becomes your wheelhouse of things that you have to look out for. Again, there's AI agents that run to do this stuff, but I think that's become more of a common handoff for us. Is the folks that are at the front lines that are designing, build, give it to the engineering team. We have less work to do on building the design part of the component, but we still have to integrate it and make sure that it's durable, scalable.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Just one quick follow up on that. Are you seeing more or less, or it's still TBD, use of third-party tools that have historically been used for doing the design type stuff with AI added in? Or are you seeing these non-technical people kind of jumping into various, for lack of better terms, naked versions of the AIs to try and get things done?
I'm seeing a realization from them coming that folks that are Figma strong and Figma heavy, when they're able to use tools that use a component library that is shared across the org, they say, hey, build me this thing, and it just, so somebody stumbled into by mistake. They had a Figma MCP set up, they put in a Figma link, it turned out that it did not read the Figma correctly. It had errored out on the MCP, but it still built a component. And when they saw that, they were like, wait a second, I don't need Figma anymore, do I? I didn't say yes or no because that's not my place. But if you're building these tools internally, you have shared libraries and shared design, then the reliance on things like Figma or whatever else is out there for design, they become a little less needed. And so you can build the demos against real data that's like staging or test data and show a component much faster than building in Figma and doing some weird interaction where you have to click through. And folks are seeing a lot of power in doing that. So they've stumbled onto the fact that they might not need these tools for design if there's a good definition you have internally of a design system and a component library.
It is interesting where these tools are going to evolve, like in which direct, right? Because they really, if you think about if you're a Figma product manager, right, you're either trying to get some AI embedded into this thing to make it as quick as possible to go from a design sort of friendly thing to a reality, or I don't know what you're, or I guess you just go deeper with design. I really don't know. It's an interesting challenge if you're in that space. Like, how would you make them relevant at the price point they are? Right. That's the other thing. You're talking about whatever generic Cloud Code or Cloud Cowork subscription you have versus whatever you're paying Figma specifically.
Yeah, Google a few weeks ago released a product called Stitch, which is like you talk to it and builds you a UI, and then you can export it as an app. Like that's useful, and I think it's free. I'm gonna say maybe, but it's a great product. I tried it.
Free until the tokens start getting charged for, then it's not so free. Let me ask you one more sort of closing question. So let's play Nostradamus here in a couple of years from now. Where do you see this happen? So like today, I think, again, we've established that as of right now, a non-engineer cannot just show up and build a whole business on AI with AI and not understanding what's going on. There's too many pitfalls, too many issues. What happens in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years?
They can. That's the short answer is they can. The tools are the worst they're going to be. They're getting better. A lot of the things we're talking about today are probably going to be built in near time to make sure that the security, the amount of builders is going to explode. Like the number of people building stuff, I feel there's a ton of them today, but I'm just because I'm in this all day that I see that. But really, like that curve is going to go up so exponentially. You're going to have tools that are going to require safe deployment of these things that it does double check for that stuff. And I think that's going to be a pretty interesting market because there's going to be a lot of companies that pop up in that space.
And like the parallel to this is platform as a service, right? It's like how many businesses started on Heroku and actually had a decent run on it until they decided that they were at a scale where like a proper cloud was necessary. But
yeah,
if Lovable or what have you ever becomes Heroku level dependable.
Yeah. If those, I think, this is again opinion. My opinion is things like Lovable, Vercel, those types of things. If they can own the entire stack now, and they become like the new sort of AWS or Google Cloud. Like you can and AI native. Now you write stuff and you build it there and you push it there. And you don't have to write one line of code, and they take care of all of that and abstract it away. That's an interesting place to be.
Doing it in a language that's optimized for this kind of thing too, right? Like it's like if you control the whole stack, you certainly control whatever language or languages are being used to do it.
Yeah, and I see Vercel. I know there's rumors of them doing that pretty soon, of just owning the entire end to end. I'm sure Supabase being a back end tool, but I'm sure they'll now add a front end portion because they're now integrated front to back. And I think that's gonna be the new norm where people build on these. Because the rest of us, we use 3 or 4 clouds. Like that's where we deploy code, and because we know how to pull the levers and toggle the toggles, we're able to deploy code. But if you know all that, and you can just build that into one of these engines that you can speak English to, and they can do all of that for you.
Yeah, for a fee, a big fee.
Yeah. It's and some of them started very like low fees to get barrier to entry like really low, so they'll be free or super low to get started. And then when you build that app and it's like it gets traction, now you want to get to the next 10,000 monthly users. They're going to jack you up, of course, but I think at that stage you're willing to pay. And
or look to port. I mean,
yeah,
there's a case that can be made that they're great for getting, the Series A going, and when it comes time for
yep,
Series C, part of
yeah,
that is not just marketing, it's moving on to something you can afford monthly.
There will be a cottage industry that
mhm,
specializes in taking lovable, what have you, apps,
mhm,
and at a certain point of a company's size, just pushing them to the cloud, and
yeah.
you doing that as a service.
Yeah, I'll add one last comment. Somebody asked me this morning. I had a chat with somebody. Why would we buy something versus build something now? And it's a good question, because you can technically build something that's very bespoke and custom, but that's still I think the fundamental point is it still distracts you from what you're trying to build as a product yourself. So the more you start, like I get down these rabbit hole all the time, and I have to stop myself. Like, I want to go build this stuff because it's easy to build, but now I'm not doing the stuff I can actually go monetize, because I've distracted away to build a plugin for
Well,
myself.
I think it's that, and I think the other thing is there's a massive difference between building and maintaining, and like most mortals who have not lived with I've supported this app for the last 5 years in production just don't understand what that actually entails. And like, I have a natural aversion to doing it myself because I'm like, well, there will come a time where I'm going to have to maintain this thing that I don't care about any longer or don't have the bandwidth to deal with. So there's a reason you pay people to do it.
Well, and the other element to that is that a lot of those systems that you're using today, just pick Salesforce or something like that, has a enormous amount of data that you don't have access to, but you're benefiting from in some way by using their system. And to me, my response to that usually is, we all have cars and know how to drive. Maybe what we should do is have one person drive everybody to work, right? Because then you wouldn't have to drive anymore. It just doesn't make any sense to me on many levels. Yes, little utilities, build them especially if they're relatively disposable, build them by the millions, go for it. But not from the standpoint of, this is a key element of our business. We're going to start doing payroll now and something that Fred built over the weekend. I just don't think that makes any sense.
And I don't think that'll happen. The whole SaaS crash that occurred after Cowork got released, that was just, I think, a silly overreaction to.
And we build a ton of AI into a ton of tools we use. So it takes a very large team to do that. It's not just one person vibe coding it at home. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of engineers that are responsible for AI orchestration and making sure that AI is working correctly for folks that are using them outwardly, from our company ourselves. So
It's not easy. Absolutely. Well, on that note, this was a wonderful discussion. Really appreciate you being on. Thank you so much for coming.
appreciate you
That
both.
was awesome.
Thank you very much for the questions, and I'd love to chat AI again.
Absolutely. Well, if you found this topic interesting or relevant to you, LA CTO Forum has lots of opportunities to engage with other CTOs on topics just like this one. If you're interested in learning more, find us on LinkedIn or on the web at lactoforum.org. And until next time, may your deployments be smooth and your tech debt manageable.
And remember, if you can't handle the exception, at least log it properly. We'll catch you next time.